Dricus Du Plessis is an interesting fighter to say the least, and I do think that Sean Strickland may be in for a long night. This is a perfect matchup for Dricus, which I will refer to as DDP to save time. This will impact Sean Strickland like he has never encountered before, and I can see DDP finishing the fight just like Alex Pereira did when he met Sean Strickland on UFC 278. First, let me start with his style, and as per Joe Rogan,
Dricus looks awkward when he fights. He moves different, but that movement and that awkwardness makes him difficult to time.
DDP is constantly switching stances and firing off crazy combinations. For anyone that has fought or watched fights, you know that switch stance fighters are always so difficult to predict because they can fire from anywhere. I believe it was during the Brad Tavares fight where he threw a 2 and then did a spinning oblique kick. I have almost never seen that utilized in the UFC by anyone not named John Jones, and this is exactly what makes DDP a crazy matchup for Sean Strickland. DDP's style is very wonky, but yet he does well in almost every aspect of MMA. And speaking of his style, I feel as though I should give more background to who DDP is, as he is a 2-time EFC middleweight and former EFC welterweight champion, as well as being a former KSW welterweight champion, and these promotions are in South Africa and Poland respectfully, so on the feet, I don't think there's many people that can outstrike him, and the last person that did was in 2018 by the name of Roberto Soltic in a middleweight championship fight. Again, take what you may, but this dude is undefeated in the UFC. Going into DDP striking and some of the vulnerabilities, yes, there are some concerns where his striking is not up to par, and you see that during the Darren Till fight, and where DDP can be susceptible is to those clean sidestepping shots. What DDP likes to do as part of his stand-up defense is have a really high guard. So what Darren Till essentially did was just kept loading him up to fire the left hand. But the high guard of DDP reminds me of Gaethje, and they almost mimic the same motions when they throw that leg kick. They throw, and then they keep a super high guard for any incoming attacks. The problem arises when the kick does not land and now their body is all open, and we saw a glimpse of this during the Robert Whittaker fight where Whittaker started peppering DDP's body and mixing up the attacks. DDP is a very powerful puncher and can fire from both stances. The way DDP does this is by his blitzes, where he will essentially jump forward into an opponent with a barrage of punches hoping one of them is going to land. This usually comes off the back foot and when he is getting walked down. But let's not forget, DDP likes to always advance and lead the dance, so that's why it's such an interesting matchup with an opponent like Sean Strickland that almost never gives up the center of the octagon. These blitzes are also tough to predict because they come from both stances. Not too many fighters have seen success against this, and I would say that it takes a sniper or a true wrestler to distill this blitz. The way to stop it is exactly what DDP did to Till, where he would let him throw and then boom, shoot the double or the single. This would work wonders against DDP considering how close that he is his legs together. DDP, again, is a kickboxer and almost always has that back leg on a spring, ready to attack at a moment's glance. In theory, this makes perfect sense, but when you start to look at DDP's wrestling, it becomes a whole different story. Going into DDP's wrestling, it's very simple. DDP loves to wrestle, and he made it a point after the Brad Tavares missed slip where he landed on his back that he would show how good he can truly wrestle against a fighter like Darren Till. If you haven't watched, DDP tried to do a trip like the ones Khabib loves to do and accidentally fell on his back and gave up position. DDP then went into his next fight learning from the slip and put on a clinic against Darren Till. While we see a lot of wrestlers just try to keep control time and hold the opponent down, Bilal Muhammad, DDP looks to use wrestling as a way to fire the hands. Just during the Till fight, I remember there's a moment where DDP had 60 strikes compared to Till's 0.
Look at the strike count. 60 shots landed by Du Plessis, 0 for Darren Till. I mean, that's crazy.
But Joe,
the reason was not because he was piecing him on the stand-up, but rather the threat of wrestling, and also he locked up one of Darren Till's legs, which kept him worried. But we even see it during the Whittaker fight where the most pivotal point of the fight is when DDP got Whittaker down and rained a crazy elbow on him to finish the round. DDP obviously will look for the darts and the body lock, but he's patient enough to use strikes to open up the room for wrestling. This is exactly what makes DDP different from Strickland's prior opponents in Abus and others that look to use the takedown as a way to drain the energy. DDP puts on a relentless pace enough while wrestling, and not too many people can weather the storm. Now, in the first breakdown of Sean Strickland, which if you haven't watched, go back and see,
but it's two completely different styles. The styles makes fights.
This is the perfect style to stop Strickland. Since Strickland stands so tall, that is a wrestler's wet dream. I can see DDP standing for the first minute, then planning a fake blitz to a single or double leg. While Sean does have some good takedown defense, let's not forget some of his last opponents have been mostly strikers, where that threat isn't even presented. One of my favorite fighters is Wonderboy Thompson, and most of his fights have to be against strikers, or else it's going to be a wrestling session. DDP is going to make sure that he brings Sean to deep waters, and who can stand up in those last final championship rounds if DDP doesn't get him out in 2. Santi also mentioned that DDP does not have the crazy power to negate the sloppiness in his striking. While yes, DDP can be sloppy on the feet, are we going to forget about Whitaker being dropped by a jab? DDP has the power, and he's shown it with half of his wins coming from knockouts or TKOs. Talking about those later rounds as well, a lot has been said about DDP's gas tank and how he can't go past 3 rounds, and while that has not been disproven other than the Brad Tavares fight, Dricus did get surgery to fix that deviated septum. If you watch back the earlier fights of DDP, he was a known mouth breather in the cage. This obviously is terrible for stamina, but was never taken advantage of because he would finish fights within a round or 2 rounds. In the Whitaker fight, where he got that fixed, he looked great. So you're telling me someone that could barely breathe in the cage was knocking people out and going 3 rounds, but yet now that they've received the surgery, it's as though the stamina stays the same? That doesn't make any sense, and I'm excited to see DDP go into a brawl with Sean Strickland because that gas tank is going to prove to be a deciding factor. The reason being is that DDP fights at such a high clip and the volume is immense, but let's not count Strickland out either because his stamina is crazy good, and he also puts on a relenting pace as well. This is the part where I explain how DDP beats Strickland. Strickland is very defensive, and that defense is amazing, but again, I think the wrestling is going to reign supreme in this fight. Earlier in our other video about Strickland, Santi said that DDP throws these crazy hooks when entering the pocket, and I can see DDP clipping Sean with it almost identical to how Pereira did. While DDP may not have the anomaly that is Pereira's left hook, he does attack from all types of different angles, and this can be one of the ways he distills the ever-marching Strickland. I think that DDP can go those later rounds, and with the power in both hands, can end the fight early. Also, DDP is from South Africa, as some people have been commenting, so I guess that gives him brownie points. Now, this is the way how DDP can lose against Strickland, and DDP often finds himself using those blitzes and leaving his chin way up in the air, and you can see it in almost all of his fights, and this is a big red flag in his game. Luckily, no one has taken advantage, but if there's anyone, it's Sean Strickland. DDP also has that high guard where he notoriously protects his head as he steps in, and I would love to see a liver shot from Strickland to set DDP down. Just because I feel as though we don't see those anymore in the UFC, and that's also where DDP is most susceptible, the body. DDP could gas out, as that is a factor, but I don't think that's how he'll lose if he does lose. I can see Strickland firing an uppercut or walking DDP down and throw one of those probing twos at DDP. The final way I could see DDP lose is if Strickland utilizes the side hook or any side attack. Because DDP rushes in, we could see a Sean O'Malley knockout or McGregor knockout where they sidestep and cleanly knock out the lunging opponent. Do I think this will happen? No. But if DDP is going to lose, it will be one of these ways. So now time for my fight prediction. I am riding with the South African in Dricus Du Plessis. When you add up all the pros I've stated before and take away Sean Strickland being great in his own regard, I think Dricus gets it done within 3 rounds. There may be already a mental edge for Dricus with that whole father thing he said before.
Bro, you think your dad beat the shit out of you? Your dad doesn't have shit on me. I'm gonna show you what it's like to beat you. I mean, every childhood memory you have is gonna come back when I'm in there with you. Every single one, the one where you lie in bed at night, where your dad comes in and he beats the shit out of you.
I will take your fucking soul. You understand me, you fucking pussy?
Which I am not sure if it's too far or hilarious. I haven't really decided yet, but I'm leaning on too far. Add all of that together, and you have... For those that have made it this far, be sure to subscribe to never miss another breakdown, and I want to give a sincere thank you and want to know if you guys enjoy these types of videos. Comment your guys' thoughts, reactions, and what you guys want to see next, but for now, it's been Studs.